Hey, what's up, guys? It's Jonathan here. So, the New York Fed just released data on U.S. household debt. Year over year, U.S. household debt is up 8.3%. Now, you might be thinking inflation is up 8.1%. So, no, duh, housing debt is going to be up. Household debt's going to be up 8.3%. But let's get into it because it's a lot more complex than that. So this is the highest increase in house year over year in household debt since 2008. So this number isn't adjusted for inflation. So basically, it's the same as inflation. But let's break it down. Obviously, the biggest debt that U.S. households have is mortgage debt. That made up most of the year over year rise that we saw. It's up $282 billion in the third quarter, or about 9.3% year over year. Home prices in that same period rose about 7.5%, according to Redfin Data Center. So it is mostly in line. We probably did have some people who borrowed money to upgrade their homes or to upgrade their homes by cash out refinancing or just to get a bigger home in general or maybe pulled money out of their home to go spend. So I'm guessing that's where we get that delta between the mortgage debt and home prices. When it comes to credit card debt, we did see that increase as well. It increased 15% year over year, which is the biggest increase we've seen in the past 20 years on a year over year basis. And with inflation at about 8%, it shows that balances aren't just increasing only because of inflation. And this data may make you think, oh, well, people are just overspending. They need to start saving money and start living within their means. But the report from the New York Fed did go on to state that there is a very massive discrepancy in how inflation affects different households. So credit card balances increased the most for borrowers between the ages of 30 and 59, and borrowers who also lived in low income areas with balances above pre-COVID levels, whereas balances of older borrowers and people who lived in higher income areas actually are still below pre-COVID levels. It is showing that people who are more affluent are having an easier time keeping their credit card balances down versus people who are in low income areas or who are younger. And it completely makes sense because inflation is a regressive tax, which pretty much the definition of a regressive tax, because I know a lot of people use that word, but they never explain what it means. It's pretty much a tax that's applied uniformly. Like think about it. If like let's say somebody who makes $500,000 goes to a gas station and fills up their Honda Civic. Then someone who makes $20,000 a year goes to the same gas station and fills up their same Honda Civic. Well, then basically what happens is that, well, an increase of like 25% in gas prices affects the person who's making $500,000 much less than the person who's making $20,000. So even though the price increase is even for both people, it's not felt evenly with both people. And that is kind of what we're seeing with inflation. And it's kind of gives the Fed almost this damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. Because if they raise rates, then that tightens monetary policy, which the ideal is that is supposed to lower inflation, but it makes servicing debt harder for people, especially people with lower incomes. But then if the Federal Reserve doesn't raise rates, then we have a wage price spiral, which means more inflation, which makes it harder for people with lower incomes to live on a day-to-day basis. This is why I got so irritated with what Gavin Newsom did in California, because it's like, why are we giving inflation relief checks to people who make $500,000 a year? Like that makes no sense. Like it would have been one thing if it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna give inflation relief checks to everyone who makes under 60K a year. Great, because they're the ones who are suffering. It's not the people who have money who are suffering. Like it you know what? I'm not even going to start with California. Let's not even do that. Another category that went up significantly in the New York Fed's report was HELOCs. So HELOCs were up 18% year over year, and people tend to tap into HELOCs, our home equity line of credits. They tend to tap into them to make very big unnecessary purchases. So like buying cars, buying boats, spending money, you name it. It's generally speaking, that's what most people tend to use that money for. And the Federal Reserve has is has mentioned that they are looking into this to really see to get a feel how consumers are doing in terms of spending. And I think that they do want to see some housing wealth get crippled as well through their actions. So in that way, they slow down the consumer and they kind of squeeze out the buying power of the consumers. So it's definitely one to watch out for in future reports if we do want to see if the Fed will pivot or not, because they are looking at that as well. So overall, I'm not surprised to see debt on the rise, especially given that we have an inflationary recession where we have people who were stuck in the house. It seems like people are just going to keep spending and spending and spending until they just don't have any more purchasing power, until they've maxed out the credit cards, they've cleaned out the bank account, they've cleaned out the home equity. It just doesn't seem like the spending will stop until everything is emptied. And the sad part about it is that we are moving into a more recessionary economy. And the saddest thing would be if someone who spend got themselves into all this debt, and then now they have to figure out how they're going, and then they lose their job at the end of it all. Then it's almost like, wow, they're screwed. And it's been something that I have been talking about for the past year, that the Federal Reserve might start tightening and they might start breaking things, and they don't care. They just want to tighten, get rid of inflation, and whoever gets massacred in the middle of all of it, that's their problem. Um it's very unfortunate, but it is the honest truth that of what happens during inflationary times, that really it's just get inflation down, get inflation down, get inflation down. I really think that we gotta watch closely on the consumer and possibly, hopefully, seeing them run out of money so we could finally start to see inflation come down. But you do have to realize this is a lagging indicator because we're getting data from that the accumulation period ended in, what was it, the end of September, and we're just getting it now in November. So it is a lagging indicator, but I think that this is like a really good data point for us to look at. So I like to thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.